I'm a touring musician. I've traveled around the world with my bass guitar, and over the years, I've developed strategies to get my bass guitar safely from one place to another while flying in airplanes. Strategies that I'm gonna share in this video. I'll be showing other YouTubers suggesting similar things because today I wanna paint a picture of the legal Wild West that is transporting musical instruments on planes.
There's a certain kind of bravery to travel with an upright bass.
Live music is a $31 billion industry, so it would seem like there would be economic pressure to have consistent instrument transportation guidelines for airlines, but no, that's not what we have. There is in fact a bizarre legal purgatory where the law and airline policies do not reflect what's going on in the cabin, and professional musicians must employ Byzantine strategies of manipulation, sneaking, and even bribery just to get priceless musical instruments from one place to another. Let's get into it. This video is brought to you by Skillshare. Part 1, Law and Policy. In 2012, President Barack Obama signed the FAA Modernization and Reform Act. Thanks, Obama. Under pressure from the American Federation of Musicians, Section 403 included language guaranteeing musical instruments in the cabin, either as hand baggage for instruments like guitar specifically, or paying extra for an extra seat for larger instruments like cello. The FAA law was implemented by the Department of Transportation in 2015, which further clarified the so-called first come, first serve rule. If there is space in the overhead compartments at the time you board the aircraft, you can put your musical instrument there, even if the space taken by the musical instrument could accommodate one or more other carry-on items. Now, if you've ever traveled with your instrument, you know that these legal protections don't really amount to much.
Musicians say they are often forced to check their instruments when they fly, even though, as we discovered, the president signed a law giving them the right to carry them on.
I pretty regularly have to fight to prevent my bass from being tossed in the hold as cargo, even if there's plenty of room in the overhead bins. And I'm definitely not the only one. Because the law isn't protecting these priceless instruments, these tools of our trade, these pieces of our undying souls. The International Federation of Musicians has a helpful website charting airline policies and whether or not crew actually follow those policies or the law. There are only 8 airlines which get the green rating. All the other airlines on this website are not great for musicians. Many airlines just do not follow their own policies when it comes to musical instruments. Korea Air's size restrictions for musical instruments as carry-on baggage are smaller than just regular carry-on baggage, which seems almost punitive to me. And even if the policy is in theory good, many airline employees will simply ignore the policy or they haven't been trained in the policy. You'll often hear stories of how airlines will just say they are not bound by the law.
Just last month, he says, when he took this photo showing several empty overhead bins on his flight, the crew insisted he check his guitar.
Let me give you a pretty typical example of how this goes down. My band Sungazer tours Europe pretty regularly, and the tour schedule requires us to fly to sometimes a different city every day. Since we carry a lot of equipment, there's a lot of, shall we say, strategy that's involved when booking our plane tickets. For a recent British Airways flight between London and Madrid, we purchased one business class ticket because we calculated it was better for the overweight baggage allowance. We felt like we didn't need to purchase the extra seat for my bass guitar because according to BAA's policy that's posted online, business class tickets give the option of overhead storage of musical instruments if there is room on board. Yeah, there's no mention of short haul flights, only long haul, but you know, they're reasonable people, right?
You fool.
So I got past the gate agent, I had my bass guitar on me, and we went on to the tarmac, which is pretty typical for European airlines. But right before boarding, I was stopped. I asked to check if there was any room on board, but this employee was just not having it. I didn't really have any choice at this point. It was an active runway. I didn't really want to make a scene, so I just boarded to find, of course, room in the overhead compartments. By that point, my bass was in the cargo bay, and there was really nothing I could do about it.
I want to keep that my guitar.
So that one is in the hold.
So it will be at baggage?
Yes.
Okay.
So British Airways does objectively suck, but how might I have avoided this fate? If you ask the opinion of flight attendants, they'll reply things like, if you can't stack it, don't pack it. Or better yet, don't take your guitar, which is one of the more unhelpful things to say to a touring musician. Like, we have to figure out a way of traveling with these instruments as part of our job. So let's talk strategy. How do you do this thing? What should I have done differently? Part 2, strategy. First, buying an extra seat. is it viable? Between 4 musicians, our tour in November had 3 round-trip transatlantic flights and 30 short-haul European flights. This added up to $7,123, which potentially, if you're buying extra seats to protect the saxophone, cymbals, bass guitar, and keyboard, would be doubled. With profit margins so incredibly thin for touring, throwing thousands to tens of thousands of dollars at extra flights is just not remotely possible, so we're not buying extra seats. It sometimes works to buy extra seats here and there, especially on low budget airlines, but doubling our transportation costs just isn't tenable. The more obvious answer is that I should have used a flight case and checked my base as cargo in the cargo hold. There are many different kinds of flight cases. There are even specialty flight cases which double as gig bags. Many experienced professionals prefer the convenience of checking a flight case.
Every time I see musicians getting on the plane with an instrument, I really want to hit them to the ease of what it means to check the bass or the guitar. So much less stress going into it knowing you just have to roll with a little bag and you're good.
The thought of not dealing with any of this is very tempting. However, if you check it in the hold, there is the very real risk that baggage handlers will damage it due to negligence, yes, even in flight cases. Not just baggage handlers, but the TSA routinely damages instruments during inspection. I'd rather duke it out with a gate agent than risk this every time that I travel for my job.
Checked them in at the airport and gotten to the other side and literally had them blown to bits. So it's just kind of like rolling that dice. Good luck.
Assuming your instrument isn't damaged in the process, airlines lose luggage, like a lot.
They'd just gotten back from a tour, but discovered many of their guitars had not.
Yeah, we're missing like 5.
It's frustrating. It can cause a tour a lot of money.
I think I was flying Emirates, and I checked 2 guitars in a double Enki hard case, and it did not make it in time for the gig.
Last June, Sungazer had a crisis involving SAS losing Sean's cymbals. Go check out Sean Crowder's video on how that nearly derailed everything. We now put air tags in like everything for the peace of mind and the GPS tracking, but the reality is you have to assume that your luggage will be lost at some point and mitigate that risk by carrying the essentials of the show on board as hand luggage, including, you know, your instruments.
We have everything that we need to play Sungazer's set with us, actually on our backs. This is coming with me in the cabin.
Yep. Now, in the text of the DOT implementation of the FAA law, there is this attempt to calculate the benefit that musicians would receive from this new law. The attempt ultimately failed because there's just no data kept. Nobody knows how many musicians travel, how many instruments are checked as luggage, or how much money is lost due to lost or damaged gear or rescheduled concerts. Which is strange for a $31 billion industry. You'd think you'd want to know something like that, right? Doing their best guesstimate, the DOT says it would be reasonable to assume that professional musicians travel by air at the same rate as the general flying public, an average of 1 to 2 round trips per year. Now, in my experience, that's just not the case. Professional musicians fly quite a bit more than once or twice per year. My point is that nobody knows where the instruments are, least of all the airlines. You can't make informed decisions about your business unless there's data and the rule of law, and there clearly isn't. Sungazer, a small business within this industry, can't afford that level of risk. And so even if the policies aren't being followed, many musicians, myself included, still try to bring their instruments on board as hand baggage, maybe to try and exercise some degree of agency over the situation. There's a bit of an unofficial playbook that musicians use to do this. Let's talk about it. Part 3, instruments as hand luggage. The first step, reconnaissance. Before you book your ticket, check out what kind of plane you'll be flying. You can't easily Google overhead bin dimensions because airlines don't publish those, but with enough digging, you might be able to find something. Just find any evidence that your guitar will fit for that particular airplane. You can also just type the name of the plane and walk through into YouTube, try and get a feel of the plane's layout from there.
Look ahead to find out which type of plane you're flying on.
You know, in American, they generally fly like Airbus 380s or 321s.
Yep. My bass fits in most overhead compartments with the exception of Boeing 767s. I know not to fly them. Smaller planes have weird layouts that sometimes technically can fit in a bass, so you'd be surprised. I recommend getting a beefy gig bag like a mono case. Full transparency, I am with mono, but there are other fantastic options out there. These kinds of cases are sturdy enough to protect your instrument in the cargo hold if absolutely necessary. Wrap it in clothes, paying close attention to protecting the neck. This also gives you extra packing space for your clothes.
Put a lot of my clothes on top and underneath.
Socks in there, or blankets, or t-shirts.
Put it in here for extra support and padding.
You may or may not need to detune the strings. It's probably a myth that tension on the strings will cause the neck of your instrument to snap, with the pressure changes in the cargo hold.
So the idea that you need to detune your guitar before traveling, it's definitely a myth.
But if your instrument is damaged in the hold, airlines will just claim that you didn't loosen your strings to get out of paying any damages to you, and claim that any damage to your instrument is because of your own negligence. So to prevent that, you could detune your strings just a little bit before boarding and film yourself doing it just so that they can't get away with that line. It's a very common one, unfortunately. When you first arrive at the airport, sometimes the check-in counter will want you to check your instruments along with the rest of the baggage that would go down the conveyor belt. Insist that it's very fragile and you'd prefer to check it at the gate. Also, hide your instruments with your body if you need to.
Just don't let them know that you're wearing symbols. I tend to walk around like this in the airport. It's like, you can't see it. You can't see it.
Since most airline overhead compartments work on a first-come, first-served basis, it's important that you board the plane as early as possible so that there is room. Many airlines offer priority boarding for an extra fee, but a nice conversation with a gate agent prior to boarding sometimes also works.
You can almost always ask, "Can I please pre-board?" with a smile, and every time that I've ever asked, they said yes.
Politely ask the gate agent if I can be one of the first boarding groups because I have an instrument with me.
Another strategy entirely is to not make your presence known to the gate agent, and in some ways deceive them to the fact that you are carrying a musical instrument on board.
If the gate agent is on your left, put that instrument on your right so it doesn't look like a big, wide instrument.
I want you to flip it upside down like that, and then piece of cake, you should be able to walk on.
I just hold the guitar down low, upright at my side.
Take my gig bag off my shoulders and hold it in front of me.
These hilarious dance moves are all to prevent the gate agent from insisting you gate check your instrument. Now, in different countries, gate checking means different things. In the US, that means a special handler will meet you at the end of the jet bridge or on the tarmac so that your instrument will be the very last thing loaded into the cargo hold of the plane.
At least I can see the guy. He seems legit.
At the other end, this means that your instrument will be the very first thing that's loaded off of the plane and will likely be waiting for you at the end of the jet bridge.
You hand them your bass as you walk onto the plane, and then when you're walking off the plane, they're handing it back to you.
I made a gate check the guitars for this flight, so I hope the guitars are all right.
In Europe and Asia, however, gate checking just means that it gets thrown into the hold like anything else. And you will have to find your instrument at baggage claim at the end of the conveyor belt. Womp womp, sucks for you.
Oh well. This guitar's been through some serious shit. Yeah, I think it's fine.
The gate agent will likely insist that the plane is very full and there is no room on board, even if you have priority boarding. Don't take their word for it. There's no way to know until you actually board the plane.
Can I try it to see it in overhead? It will.
When it doesn't work, you have to immediately come back. You have to load it, yeah?
Okay.
If they physically block you from boarding, which does happen, you can show them the law and the airline policy on your phone or in a physical printout.
And say, hey, you know, this is the law. I'm allowed to take my bass or guitar or whatever.
Their policy, and you can even show them, and that should get you through if you run into a problem.
I always have a copy of the airline's instrument policy.
You can have it on your phone. I used to save it on my phone.
But in my experience, that's never really helped because, you know, citing obscure legal code, Section 403 of the FAA Modernization Act, etc., gives off the same vibes as a sovereign citizen type ranting about their rights. So do your best to not give off those kinds of vibes. Doesn't really help, even if you are in the right. If I've successfully gotten onto the plane, usually the first thing I do is ask a flight attendant, very nicely, very politely, if there is any extra room, maybe potentially in the crew closet for my bass guitar.
Hey, can I put my instrument in the coat rack?
Coat closet.
Is there room in a closet for this?
They absolutely do not have to do this, and it is not policy at all.
You might be able to get in there.
But most flight attendants, if you ask them nicely, are cool with this because it leaves more room for the overheads and is in general a little bit less of a hassle.
Okay, thank you so much.
I've heard of people putting instruments in garment bags to pretend like they're carrying a coat. I guess that might work too, but honestly, you probably don't need to do that. Although if you look at the footage of the British Airways incident earlier, this guy is carrying a garment bag on board, so maybe that would have actually worked. If the closet isn't possible, then just hope and pray that there's room in the overheads. Yes. But if you did everything right with priority boarding and that reconnaissance mission, you shouldn't have any issue.
Speaking of overhead, watch it don't.
It's generally courteous to stack your instruments together if you're traveling in a group. Other customers are less likely to hate you, and also to try and cram their stuff on top of your instrument. There are some, shall we say, more extreme strategies to getting guitars on board.
Now, I'll post pictures of all this stuff so you guys can see, but I stuck the body inside my small, North Face backpack here.
One method involves detaching the neck of your instrument from its body so that both the neck and the body fit a backpack. You then can reassemble everything after your flight. This is wild. I would never do this to my instrument, but it is something that world-famous guitarists like Julian Lage do, a trick that can be traced back to the legendary country shredder Danny Gatton.
Believe it or not, I have a whole guitar plus the tools I need to put it back together in this backpack. Let's take a look.
You know, it's kind of bleak that musicians feel the need to do this, but with so much on the line, so much risk, people will try anything to get their instruments safely from point A to point B. You know, to give that extra peace of mind, some people will take out insurance policies on their instruments, but because, again, no data is kept, how the actuarial risk is calculated is probably just some guy at an insurance office thinking, yeah, musicians probably travel, 1 to 2 times round trip per year? Which really makes me think nobody knows except for the musicians what's really going on. If you know where to find this data, how many instruments travel every year, which should be a pretty simple thing to calculate, right? Somebody should be tracking it, and yet nobody is. Let me know, because I really want to know. All the information out there on this subject is just musicians communicating different strategies to mitigate the risk of this system, but nobody knows what the risk actually is. Most people emphasize how important it is to be nice and polite and courteous to the gate agents and the cabin crew and the airline workers.
Be really nice.
Being friendly with the gate.
Be extremely nice.
Just be polite.
Because the system itself situates these workers in an antagonistic relationship to touring musicians, which sucks because everybody's just trying to do their job, right? Like, imagine as a part of your daily job, you had to surrender your cell phone to somebody that would then, throw it in the cargo hold of whatever airline you were flying that day. I really hope my cell phone's case is strong. We'll see. Okay. Okay, cool. Like, imagine that was your daily life. You had to have somebody throw your cell phone like that. That would be stressful. You'd be arguing with people all the time to try and not get them to throw your cell phone like that. But that's literally every day on tour. I have to argue with somebody to not throw my cell phone around. Your job ends up not being rocking out in front of adoring fans. Your job ends up being having arguments with stressed airport workers day in and day out. I'd say in my experience, 95% of all of my interactions with airline staff are positive and everybody is professional and we get along great. But maybe 5% of these interactions are a little bit less so. And it's to those 5% of airline staff who are jaded and treat me with contempt. I'd say this: it's okay to look for another job, man. Maybe this job isn't the one for you. Maybe you want to try and do something else, something that requires a different skill set than the one that you have right now. Maybe you need some different skills for this new job. Skills that you might find on Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community that you might know from their classes on photography and illustration and design. Music too, they got a great class from Jacob Collier over there. Highly recommend that.
G. C, like that.
It's good stuff. But Skillshare also has a wealth of professional development classes in a variety of different subjects. Things like Python, Adobe Premiere, UX design. I personally am a fan of Skillshare's learning paths, a way of structuring learning so that you know what you need to know when you need to know it. With how much information is out there on the internet, it sometimes can be difficult to structure learning in a meaningful way. And Skillshare's learning paths provide great guidance, giving you many hours of content to go through without ads. It's a fantastic thing. If you're interested in any of this, Skillshare is offering a free month trial if you click the link in the description. But for the month of April, there's an even better deal. If you're ready to start learning with Skillshare, you can also get 40% off your first year using my link. I'm gonna leave both links to both deals in the description to choose whichever one is best for you. Thanks guys so much for watching. Thanks to today's sponsor, Skillshare, and happy flying, y'all. Peace.